Hi everyone and welcome back to Chess for Charity. In this video, I'm going to show you an amazing checkmate in 2 problem that's going to involve some retrograde analysis. So let's buckle up and figure this out. So just taking a quick glance at this position, there are all 8 white pawns on the board, a pair of knights and the king, and black has 6 pieces on board, a pawn or a king and 5 pawns, right? So let's quickly ask ourselves, how is this position possible? How did this happen in a real game, right? That's the assumption. This happened from a real game. So let's just look at what might have been black's last move, because we have this really peculiar positioning with the pawns and the knights, and they take away a lot of squares from the black king. So you might start wondering, how did this position come about? What was black's last move? And that is the first key insight into figuring out the checkmate in 2. If you want to start moving pieces like the knight and just start doing stuff like this is not going to be checkmate in 2. And it's not a trick, it's just a logical deduction, right? You have to be able to figure out in this initial position, what was black's last move? That's why it's a chess logic puzzle as opposed to just a normal chess puzzle. That's the retrograde analysis part of this. So you might ask yourself, how did this come about? Let's just look at the pieces. Right? We have all of these things. Let's figure out which ones are possible to move, which ones are not. Well, right off the bat, it can't be the H pawn or the B pawn. Those pawns are on their starting square, so that couldn't have been black's last move. So we'll rule these ones out. What about the king? Well, I just mentioned that the knight and the pawns, or the knights and the pawns, cut off all of these squares. So the king couldn't have gotten here in their last move because these squares were already covered around the king. Okay, so we've ruled out the B pawn, the king, and the H pawn. We can also rule out this E pawn really easily because it couldn't have moved on their last move because this king was here. So that doesn't make sense, right? So we have just these 2 pawns. Well, where did the pawns come from? They could have gone from F7 to F5, D7 to D5, maybe D6 to D5. You see what I'm saying? It could be a full move or a single move, right? The two moves in one or the single. Well, it couldn't have come from either F6 or D6 because that would be checking the black king, right? So we know already with just logic and awesome deduction, one of the moves in this position was either D7 to D5 or F7 to F5. Great. Now we don't know anything about which one it is. And this is where the logic piece comes in. We can actually prove which move was last. And once we know which move was last, we can conclude the mate in 2. Now you might tell me in this position, it doesn't matter which one is last because I can take en passant and the puzzle is solved, right? Whichever way. And that would be correct. But for the completeness of the puzzle, I think it's worth looking into which pawn it was and why. So you have to remember, black has 6 pieces on the board. And if you count up the captures that led to this position, it will be 10 captures for white. Just as an example, let's just say this pawn came from the H file, maybe something like 1, 2, 3 captures. We'll say this pawn ran there. This pawn ran to this one. So maybe, 1 capture. We can do this. I don't want to go one by one here, but the idea is that you can get 10 captures. There are lots of ways to do it. You can do an immediate capture and then something like this. Right? I think that might be easier. It's up to you and how you want to construct the puzzle. But it's not too hard to construct. And then this one. Yeah, I think I did this already. Anyway, that's the idea. 10 captures, right? You can count them all if you want, which means every single piece that black had must have been captured by a white pawn. That's all I'm trying to say with that. And again, you can make it however you want. So which move would be possible then if that's the condition? Well, let's ask ourselves a question here. If it was D7 to D5, the question you must ask yourself, how did the C8 bishop get out of the pawn chain to get captured? And then you realize that would be impossible. Because, just as an example, I'm going to hover this pawn over the square. If this was D7, D5 last move, this bishop here would not have gotten out to get captured somewhere. Right? Had to get captured somewhere. Maybe it got captured here, right? Something like that. Who knows? The point is that it wouldn't have been able to get out. And since we know this came from a legal position, and we know that it had to get captured because there are 6 pieces on the board right now, and there are 10 missing, and there are 10 captures for white, which again, you can count however you want. I didn't do a very good job showing that, and I can if you want, but there'll be a proof game at the end of this video. And you can deduce with just that information that d7 to d5 was not the last move. Therefore, the only candidate remaining for the final move of the game, or final move for black, I should say, was f7 to f5. That was the last black move. And with that information, we are now able to deduce the fact the checkmate in 2 is g takes f6. And now, no matter what they do, they can take your knight, they can take your other knight, they can push. It doesn't matter. You you move your pawn with checkmate, because one of the knights will be supporting this pawn, and the rest is all held together. So that's it. It's a chess logic puzzle, so think about it for a little bit. It's not meant to be a trick. It's really meant to be just a deduction, right? There's a similar video I have out that's kind of like this, but I didn't explain it as well, and it led to some negative comments. So hopefully you understand what I'm getting at. Definitely not trying to trick you, just enjoying logic and puzzles with you. But yeah, that's it for now. I'm going to put a proof game at the end of this video. So if you want to see how I did it, just feel free to watch it. It's not the best. I just gave it my best shot at trying to figure out how it was done. But that is it for now, and hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you so much. Bye.